right, does anybody have any questions before we start? Get this course wrapped up. Nice and tidy today, hopefully. So, when is JC's review session? Tonight. What time? 7 p.m. here in this room. So, come to that. He's there for questions. If you guys don't bring questions, it'll be a short review session. So, try to look over, at least some. Ideally, you would work through a lot of the problems, or at least have looked and attempted them. That would be the best way to do it. So, JC tonight, 7 p.m. here. All right. What else? So your video projects, a couple of you emailed me. Hopefully you found where to upload them. Those need to be uploaded to Blackboard. I do not accept them on email. So, Mason?
So on mine, every time I condense it, even on shorter, it still won't let me submit it at all.
You can put in an OU help ticket, and they'll tell you how to compress it. Or you can make a YouTube link too.
Okay.
So just make a YouTube link and then just provide the link. So there's lots of different ways to cut the cookie. Javian? Yes, everybody in the group, yeah. So all of you each need to individually upload it. Okay, yeah.
I know when I uploaded it to what was that? Blackboard, I guess only put on a short clip. It only provide like a short clip, I guess.
Yeah, you might have to change the size. That's what we were just talking about. You might have to change the sizing. You can put it in OU help ticket if you need to. You can also make it a YouTube link or some other video site. As long as I can open it, it has to be open site to the public, and just provide the link. So some way, somehow, you guys figure it out. There's lots of support. You guys are more tech savvy than me, so that's why I defer it to everybody
So I can
else.
just upload it to my YouTube.
Yeah.
And then just give you a.
Yeah, just give a link to your YouTube, yeah. As long as I can click to it and watch it, that's all I need. Anybody else? Yeah.
Is it okay if it was we took a link and just copied it and pasted it onto a written
Yeah.
solution?
As long as I can open it and get to the link, and somehow, yeah, I'm pretty
Is it iOS?
flexible in
Is it
getting there.
an iOS link or iCloud link or something?
That you have to be careful with, because if I don't have an iPhone, so it has to be,
Works for any laptop.
as long as it works for anything, yeah. It just has to be like
You
MP4.
just have to download it.
Yeah, it has to be like MP4 or generalizable. Okay, so let's see. So we talked last time about income inequality, and if you listen to any news piece, they pretty much say that this is the most awful thing out there, the most one of the biggest issues in America, and I don't think it's as big of an issue as people think it is. And so that's why we're going to look at it. Ultimately, it does come down to some emotional type states. Like, how many of you feel jealous sometimes when you see somebody else in your neighborhood driving a sweet car, or they're in the big house, or you name it, right? You watch a TV show and they are abundant with material things. It's human nature to feel a little bit of that jealousy. So I want you to be able to overcome that with your brain, right? Your heart says, I'm jealous of that. Your brain should be able to at least rationalize and kind of compete with the heart to say, oh, I don't want to get too emotionally wrecked over that, right? I still might have a little jealousy. Like, I still to this day, I consider myself pretty well off, pretty blessed, and I still have those feelings, right? They're not going to go away. We're all humans, right? So as a Christian sinner, I believe that there's original sin and that jealousy is not going to disappear. So what you learn in college in economics class is to use your brain to kind of think through some of those things and maybe challenge your emotional state with some facts. And so that's what we're doing here, is to at least be able to think through, is it as bad as we think? So the last thing, just to kind of rehash, I think to kind of put us in the framework of what we did yesterday. Tuesday actually. So we break the income of the nation into the 20% called quintiles is what you'll see in this chapter. So we got the lowest quintile, the bottom 20%, and then the highest top 20%, and then you've got the middle. And so when we talk about income inequality, we're usually referring to the gap, the distance between the lowest quintile and the highest quintile. And it's possible that that's been growing. It has been growing, depending on your metric, over time. But I think that misses the ball. What is the thing that I am concerned about as an economist and as a human being? Well, I shared it with you yesterday. Who do I care about if we're looking at the 20% and the highest 20%? Why did I say I don't really care about the gap that much? Javian? Yeah, focus in on the poor. What's the situation for the poor? What does their situation look like? Is there things we can do to help offset whatever's going down here? Screw the gap. The gap might even, and most people agree, that the gap causes prosperity. Some people wrongfully think that the rich are taking from the poor. That's not true. Hopefully you've overcome that with your brain, thinking through the stuff we've done in this class. But if we don't worry about the gap and we focus in on the poor, and then we can use our brains to compare the poor maybe in one country versus another, what you're going to find is the data is pretty compelling that a free market system, a system unlike Russia, who is run from the top down, right? You got Putin and then you got everybody else doing what Putin wants them to do. That's not our system here. We believe in grassroots individual property rights is what we've been talking about. And the outcomes that we get are pretty compelling. And so we're going to continue to build on that. Any questions or comments there? So the last thing I left with you, I did some pencil sketches, was just that our poor are 10 times higher from 1970 to 2018. They're 10 times better off than what they were before, despite there being a gap. Well, that's just one piece of information that we're going to look at. One of the things, what are the things that cause people to be poor or for there to be a gap? And I'm going to try to get away with doing this. Then I can still write on the board. All right. So this is straight out of your book, of course. So what is the education? So top 20%, bottom 20%. How much, do you guys ever think you're going to be in the top 20%? We all have hopes and dreams. What's considered the top 20? Great, astute question. What do you think it is? How much money do you need to be making to be in the top 20% of income earners in the United States? Let me just hear some numbers. I'll start with Kaylin, but I kind of want to hear from all of you. I'm going to point to all of you since I know there was a lot of athletics going on today. So what do you think you need to be in the top 20%? Throw out a number. First thing that you guys kind of got. Over 100,000. 200. 400. 400. 500. 300. How much? 400? 400? 500. All right. I think you guys are right in line with what most Americans would think. Somewhere in the 300,000 to 500,000, which is pretty high, right? I mean, that's pretty high. Well, you just identified people in the top 5%. So 100,000 is closer to right. Yeah. I looked at the data, and it was in 2020, nationwide, 120,000 about was the income of the kind of the lowest earning of the 20%, right? So if you got that chunk of 20%, we're kind of measuring them from, the highest income in the nation to the lowest income in the nation. And so the top 5% here is around that 300 range, and the 20% in 2020, whatever, I'm trying to be roughly right here, was around the 120,000. So little do some of your parents know, between the two of them, is 120 a big stretch today if both parents are working? Two $60,000 a year jobs, or maybe one person makes 80 and the other person makes 40? That's not out in the astrosphere, right? That's not total crazy money.
I was gonna say, is the highest income for like is that for like a single person or like combined?
So when they do the data, they take the family, and that could be a single person or the household or the other people in there. That's right. So it is the family. So it's combined like household income. And then we'll get into some of those details here as we go. So that's kind of interesting. Well, here's another one that's kind of interesting. And actually, I might be a little short on that. That might be the Kansas number. I think nationwide, I got this written down. I can just look at my notes. Well, I thought I had it written down. Oh, I have it written down right here. 131, 117 for Kansas. So let me take that back. 131. But for Kansas, it's 117. In Alabama, it's 100. There was even one state like that. It's 95,000. You're in the top 25% if you, or the top 20% if you make 95,000, right? In some states for that state. But nationwide, 131. And of course, if you live in San Francisco, do I have any Californians in here? So San Fran, you probably have to be 170, 200,000. I didn't do San Fran, but California, some of the other states where there's high incomes, you might have to be up to like 170. All right, so that kind of helps put things into perspective, that we're not talking about the huge rich. Now, of course, the top 1%, we might be in the 3 million range, the top 1%. But isn't a lot of what we hear about, well, let's tax the rich, we think, let's tax these guys, 3 million is crazy. They should pay their share or something. But there's not a lot of those people around, right? So all of a sudden this kind of changes reality when we think about the top 20% is even still kind of middle income-ish, right? And then you got everybody in between here also where the rest of the United States falls. Okay, so how'd they get where they're at? Check it out. Education, percent with less than high school. Bottom 20, 22%, 2% less than high school. College degrees, 69% of them have college degrees. That's you guys, right? Hopefully here you still got some more work ahead of you. Hopefully most of you will get your degree in hand before you leave here. Only 14% in the bottom 20. Age of the household, under 35, 11%, 35 to 64. So what does that mean? We kind of talked about that Tuesday a little bit. What is that detail suggesting here about the age of the household, kind of the oldest person in the household?
That's like the golden years or whatever.
Yeah, those were the prime working years, right? So once you've graduated college, you've been building up your career a little bit by little bit, and now you're in kind of your prime working years, and then of course you retire and you drop down quite a bit. So most of the top 20% is in their prime working years. All right, and then married. So 92%, we've got a married couple. Maybe not both working, but we have a married couple. Single family, of course, is going to bring us down just by having one person alone. But maybe there's some other attributes going on too. Number of people in the family. Who's got bigger families? The top 20 or the bottom 20? Who's got a bigger family according to this data? Persons per family. Top 20. So that's kind of surprising too. I think sometimes there's a perception of, oh, the reason you're poor is you've got too many kids, right? Is that you've kind of heard that mentality? That's not reflected here. That's not reflected here. So earners per family. Now, how many people are actually out there working? 2.2, which means we've got a married couple plus maybe their 17-year-old son is working also or something, right? So we've got 2.2 people in the family that are drawing a paycheck from somewhere. And here, 0.7. All right, so then we've got percent of married families which the wife works full-time, 64 versus 9. And percent of total work hours supplied by the group. So the work hours is how many, if we add up all the people who are working, what is causing there to be some income inequality? What is this saying? This is the total number of work hours that is going on in the group. 6 versus 32. What is causing some inequality? The number of work hours is 6 for low income, bottom 20 versus top 20. What's one of the reasons we have some income inequality? So this is hours of work. What's one of the reasons that the two income groups have different incomes? They're not working, right? So again, we kind of have this perception of oh, well, they're only making $15 an hour while somebody else is making $30 an hour. That's part of the story. But another part of the story is just the number of hours, period, being worked, right? There's a lot less working going on by the bottom 20% for whatever reason. Okay, any questions or comments there? So top 20% work about 5 times as much as the bottom 20%. Okay. All right, so why has income inequality gone up? Let's get some stuff in your notes here. Why has income inequality increased? Number one, there's an increasing proportion of single parent and dual earner families. Okay, let's unpack this one a little bit. So we're saying that, are there more single parent households? Yes, right? It seems like that, as we can get into religion a little bit. Has religiosity, has Christianity been growing or shrinking? It's been shrinking, right? And so the family has always been kind of an important part of religion, even outside of Christianity in that regard. But also, what has been done with the non-believers is the largest growing group of they're maybe agnostic or they just don't believe or just don't want to think about that. So whatever's going on in our culture, there seems to be more single parent households. And then what is this one? Are there more dual earner families where mom and dad work? Again, if we go back 60, 80 years, husband worked, wife stayed at home. So a dual income. Is there more families where both spouses work? Yes. So culturally, again, we have that going on. Now, why is that leading to income inequality? That's the part we want to piece together here with this question. Why has income inequality increased? We've got two things culturally going on. Both spouses are working, and proportionately, there's a lot of single family households. Caleb?
Yeah, there's more dual earner families making double basically.
Yeah.
Compared to the single.
Absolutely, right?
2-person.
So just imagine that we live in a culture where there's none, and then all of a sudden divorce rates go up. And all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of singles, and the ones that are remaining are dual, right? So now all of a sudden the separation of income got bigger just from that cultural factor alone. Does that make sense? Kind of an interesting dynamic. Okay, so that's one thing that's gone on. So we have, so kind of the key point with this one is that single parents earn a lot less than dual earners. Where both spouses are working. All right, so that's caused there to be some separation. Number 2, earnings between skilled and unskilled workers. Earnings of unskilled and skilled workers. Do people at McDonald's today have to be more skilled than people who worked at McDonald's 60 years ago?
Yeah, I would say yes. I would say no.
There's more technology though, so.
I would say yes because there back then, right, there wasn't as much technology.
Okay, and that's what Chris was saying too. So there's more technology. So with that technology, they went to school to learn, or did they have a half-day training program on press this button, drop the fries, when you hear the buzzer, raise them up?
I say no, because I know the technology makes it easier.
Yeah, the technology in some ways could make it easier, right? Like it probably took more skill to watch the fries like I had to when I was 16 working in the Greasy Spoon restaurant. You know, you could overcook the fries, right? But McDonald's doesn't want that, so they have even the automatic lifters, I think, now, right? They pull them right out of the fry basket on a little motor probably that brings them up. But so it probably took more skill in that regard with less technology. I think that's a good point. So my point with that is that hasn't changed, but now back to kind of maybe both where Chris and Jay were going with that, with technology is there a need for a more skilled people because of technology? The higher paying jobs are higher paying because it takes a lot of education and some specialized training to do that particular job, right? They're a lot more specialized. All right, and so as cultures change, we used to have a lot more jobs that maybe it was low, no skill. As technology developed into every crevice of our lives, it became you needed to have that education and that training, but then you got paid for it. Again, that's causing a divide between incomes of skilled and unskilled workers. Okay, so earnings are pretty flat over 60 years for unskilled. But big earnings increases for skilled workers and today's technology. So that's going to cause some inequality. Again, that's not a very good argument that inequality is bad, is it? Because you might be having a flat income, but now we've got these gadgets. Even the poor are carrying one of these around. The bottom 20% has these, right? And so that was an important part of things becoming cheaper that we saw in the video on Tuesday. All right, number 3. So there's an increasing number of markets with a few people with very high incomes, earnings. There's an increasing number of markets with very few people with high earnings. So now we can get into our FANG group maybe. You guys know what FANG is? I'll give you a hint. The first one's Facebook. And then want to think what the next N is? They're all on your phone. Facebook, Apple, and chill, Netflix, G, Google. So FANG is kind of the call letters of some of the things that have been important, and this isn't all of them. We could throw Amazon in there and whatever. So all of these here, so Facebook, Apple, Google, Netflix, and then the list goes on and on. I mean, there's a number usually associated with all of our technology that we're using. I'll just put like kind of ... It's kind of a winner take all, and so if you are one of the individuals that is in the forefront of something that you hit big, it's kind of like hitting the lottery, right? So you hit it really big when you hit it big. So we're talking $100 million a year worth of income big, right? And so that starts to cause some inequality when we have these specialized markets. Sometimes these markets are characterized with government, big business playing kissy face, or cronyism. So we might throw that in here too, of cronyism, big government, and big business is bad for free markets. That is not free markets. Maybe I should put it not only bad, is not free markets. Getting government favoritism is not a free market. Does Facebook work closely with the government sometimes? Yeah, he's testifying before Congress and he's a big deal with, whether it's election fraud or whatever the case is. He's going to step to the table and help. Zuckerberg's going to help stuff out. I've been listening to some stuff with Bill Gates has been pretty influential with big pharma, big pharmacy type stuff and vaccines and all of that stuff. So, being kind of cozy with the government could be a profitable thing to do.
So it's saying it's big business is not for free markets, or
Yeah, big business and big government and big business working together, playing kissy face is the part I didn't write down here. So kissy face, basically schmoozing with each other is what cronyism is not free markets. And so that a lot of people get confused and they think, oh, United States is awful. We have this has come up with Russia too, the Russian oligarchs, if you guys have heard about that. That's basically Putin's golfing buddies and stuff. They're multi-billionaires because they've been given sweetheart deals by the government. That's not free markets. That's not competition, right? It's very anti-competitive from what we've been doing in this class. Okay, and then finally, number 4. There's sharply lower marginal tax rates. Marginal tax rates that compared to the 1970s. Now at first, that might seem like, oh, well, we just have to increase tax rates. But that's not what it's saying. What it's saying is that back in the 70s, there was actually, some of them went as high as 90%, but quite a few at 70%. So 1970s, high income taxed at 70%. Now, if you're a high income earner back in the 70s, does that give you much incentive to keep working if you've made your top bracket by the time June comes around? You might think about taking the rest of the year off. Every $100 you earn after, the government gets 70, you get frickin' 30, right? Not too great of incentives to keep working. So the point with this one is that when the tax reforms of the 1980s kicked in, and this came down to the more in the 30% level, the high 30s, then that gave incentive for high income earners to even make more money. Now we saw the results of that. What we're saying is that that caused a bigger gap, but it also caused the poor to get richer too, right? So this is all about the gap here. So 1980s reduced to, let's see if we've got a number here. Approximately, let's just put 40%. High income now has better incentive to earn more. And then we'll put in parentheses here, key point. This helps the bottom 20% too. This isn't a bad thing. This is part of why the gap doesn't matter as much as what's going on with the low. Okay, questions or comments on that? Okay, so those are our 4 things to kind of help explain the gap, why it's been growing. Now the gap can be measured in different ways as well. And you know, I thought I'd mention right now too, remember that this stuff is not on your final. This stuff is for your last test, which is due Sunday. Just kind of reminder that this last chapter, this whole week, is just for them. So this is kind of a different way of looking at inequality, and it's called the 90-10 measurement. So 90-10 measurement of inequality. Through spending, which they call expenditure, right? So through spending levels, through expenditure rather than income. So economists like to think about, well, what's going on with the material things in life? Are you getting enough food? Are you getting enough shelter? Are you getting enough clothing? Do you have some, if we look at spending, what people tend to do is smooth spending over their lives. How many of you are taking on a little debt to be in school? And why are you doing that? Make more money in the future, right? So right now, you're trying to kind of keep your spending up a little bit, knowing that you'll be able to, you're going to have to pay back some interest and some of that loans tomorrow, but you're smoothing your spending over time. It's called consumption smoothing. And so that's one way to look at inequality. So here, what this picture is showing is the 90-10 ratio versus after-tax income over time. And so expenditures have remained pretty flat, and they're about half as much in terms of the levels. So when we look at the expenditure of the 1920, so after-tax income is kind of the traditional way. So the degree of inequality expenditure is substantially less once we take that into account, and the growth of it is more flat, right? So there, another thing that kind of points towards maybe this isn't as big of a deal. Okay, the next thing I want to look at is income mobility. Income mobility. So write this one down in your notes here. Income mobility. This might be something you've never even heard of. But instead of inequality today, how is it possible for you to move through the ranks? Like now you're low income, you're in the bottom 20. What's the chance that you make it to the top 20? Probably unlikely, right? But is it possible? So that's kind of what income mobility looks like. So income mobility is the movement of families through the quintiles over time. And kind of the key point with this is that greater mobility reflects a more fair, I always hesitate to use that word a little bit, but a more fair society with opportunity. Now think about if you agree with me on that statement. Life's not fair. Yeah, that's true for everybody, right? I know some pretty unhappy rich people too. So life's not fair. We can take that as given. But if we have a society where generationally you have a chance of moving up through society over time, get an education, hit the right job, come up with a new invention or whatever, that it's possible for you to move up. Historically, if you were born an aristocrat, right, your mom and dad were the king and queen, did you have to worry about money? No. And were you likely still going to have money 80 years from now, right? So the class system, the lower class, we can look at India with kind of the formal class system. You are stuck in what you're born with, right? That's not very healthy. So the question here is, in the United States, is this your class that, if this is the class you were born into, are you stuck there? You see what I'm saying? This is kind of a cool topic to think about. So here's what some of the data looks like. This is a little confusing to kind of start off with here, but so we start off in 1987, and that is the distribution of people, right? So we've got the highest quintile, kind of ignore this for now, but these were people in 1987. There's a certain amount of people that were in the highest, the next highest, the middle, the next, and the lowest, right? So then, what do they look like in 2007? In 2007, how many of those from 1987 are still in the highest quintile? 48%. So 48% of the people who were there in 1987 are still there, which means how many people left? Who's got their math hat on here? 48% remained, 51, yeah, I was even just going to round, 52% approximately, right? Where'd they go? Well, one of them went to the poorhouse. I shouldn't go from that. That might be a little misleading here. One of them went to the poorhouse from 1987. 7% of them are now in the lowest quintile. 7, 13, 23. So 23% of them just bumped down. But 52%, this number plus this number plus this number, dropped out of the top 20%. Does that make sense? So we got people moving. It's not the king and queen thing that's going on that sometimes is perceived, that the rich are going to keep getting richer and the poor get poorer, and this is the way life's going to be, and America's going to be a hellhole 200 years from now after all of that plays out. With this type of thing, it's a little bit more encouraging at least. What about the person who was in the lowest quintile? What percent of them hit it big and they're in the top 20% now? What percent? I want to hear it. 5%. So 5% of the people who were in the bottom are now in the top 20% doing really good. Now, that's not a big jump, but they started in the lowest quintile, which means there might have been some issues with where they started. But here we go. They're still 42% in the low. So there is some persistence. If you were in the low, you stayed in the low. That's just what the data is showing, right? We can start to then think of why. That might be generational, educational disadvantages, race, whatever. You can look at all of those demographics to kind of try to unpack why that might be. But this is what the data. The thing that I like to see is that there is some mobility upwards. And here's the middle quintile. So we've got, 16 plus 6 is what, 20, that's almost 7, 23. So 30% of the people who are in the lowest are now doing okay, right? They were able to pull up. And then we've got the middles here, and we can look at how they've changed over time. So that's the idea of income mobility. Okay, questions or comments on that one? I've got a short little video we're going to look at for this one. So pull out a piece of paper. You guys are getting points today, since you are the ones that pulled through. Okay, here we go. Oh, I'm gonna get the audio.
Can admit there is a nugget of truth to this. For example,
Okay, here we go.
one often heard contemporary economic myth is that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Like any myth, there is a nugget of truth to this. For example, if we look at the data, the top 20% of income earners today do have a larger share of national income than they did in the past, and the bottom 20% of income earners do have a smaller share of national income than they had in the past. There's two problems with that data. First of all, that data doesn't tell us anything about the absolute condition of the poor. Just because one has a smaller share of income doesn't mean that one is absolutely poor. So for example, it could be the case that even though poor Americans have a smaller share of national income, their absolute income is higher. If I asked you, would you rather have a sixth of a pizza or a ninth of a pizza, your answer might depend on how big the pizza is. And having 1/9 of a pizza might be better if the pizza was much larger than the one of which you'd have 1/6. The real income of the poor Americans today is higher than it used to be, even though their share of total income is somewhat lower. But all this misses the more fundamental point. The bigger problem is that data is snapshot data that compares wealthy people in one year with wealthy people in the years before, poor people in one year, poor people years before. What it doesn't take into account is the movement in individual households through time. If we could track individual households, we might be able to know what happens to poor people in, say, 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. And in fact, we do have that data. One set of data shows that between 1979 and 1988, 86% of households that were poor in 1979 were no longer poor in 1988. A second set of data from the University of Michigan shows that of households that were poor in 1975, over 95% of them were no longer poor by 1991. One of the most important things to understand when we talk about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer is this idea of income mobility. The reality is for most Americans that they start off poor and then they slowly become richer over time. And in fact, if we look at that data comparing 1975 and 1991, what we find is that the average income gain for rich households over that period was just about $4,000, but the average gain for poor households over that period, $28,000. So what really happened between 1975 and 1991 is that the rich got richer, but the poor got richer a lot faster than the rich did. So whenever we talk about rich and poor, we have to take account of this issue of income mobility. So how can it be that most Americans are getting richer while we know that there's still plenty of poor people out there? Well, the fact is that one of the things that happens over time is who comprises the income distribution changes. Immigrants, young people entering the labor force come into that income distribution at low levels of income. They become the new poor, while the old poor slowly move their way up. So even though at first glance at the data may make it seem like the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, the reality of the United States in the early 21st century is that everybody's getting richer, rich and poor alike. And the idea that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer is largely a statistical artifact and mostly a myth.
Okay, so take a minute there to write up, and we'll have one of you share your work. And so Jay, number between 3 and 8.
7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Chris.
I wrote down that the data doesn't show like what's in each household. Like they show like what's going on in terms of like as a whole, not each household.
Okay, so each household's not being shown. Good. Who wants to add on to that? What else did you get out of there? Yeah, Caleb?
It also said that it also didn't take into account like the movement in the household income over time.
Okay, not the overtime. Javen?
The richer isn't really good. The richer is more so like different families trading off of each other.
Yeah, the shuffling of the families over time can be a little bit misleading. Jay?
Actually, what is that? What I also find interesting was he said that the poor people in the 1990s are actually getting more.
They're getting richer faster, right? Yeah, that was kind of a good thing. And that's the whole thing with the gap. Yeah, the gap analysis is that the rich got richer, but the poor got more richer proportionately in terms of the gains that they had.
Yes.
Right? They're getting richer faster, yes. And so there's some other interesting data that kind of reflects that as well. All right, so you can kind of think about you guys over time. How about you? And you should put me in your notes, over time. Right? So we think about your income level now as in your college time frame. What are you and most of your friends making? Not some of you that have a super duper deal, but 15,000 a year, 10,000 a year. Talk to me. Whatever you guys at. I know some of you. Yeah, Jay, you've got your deal with the services, right? But
Yeah, but that's the thing though. I have another job, so I make anywhere between three to like 10 grand a month, just because it's.
well, that's pretty good. $3,000 a month. Okay.
Yeah,
So
3 to 10 grand because I do life insurance.
okay. So they do some life insurance.
Yep, so that pays.
But you and your friends, 15,000, is that a fair number? 10,000? Yeah, to whatever. I mean, we could pick out some numbers. Just the average person, making 10,000 to 15,000. From these statistics, you're pretty poor, right? You are bottom 20. You are bottom 20 for sure. You're right at poverty line level. All right, so then first job for you guys. Hopefully you can make something in the at least 30, but 30, if you're an econ major, you probably could make up to 55. But I think a lot of you more are going to be down here in around, let's say, the 30, 40K range, right? Somewhere in there. Once you get above age 35, you're into those prime working years. And so shouldn't be hard for almost any major. Business majors are going to be a little bit higher. Most of you guys in here are business majors. So you might be into so let's call this kind of the mid-career time frame. You might be in the, 80,000 or so. And then you retire. And maybe you maintain or mostly retire, but you still have some passive income from your investments and your savings. Hopefully, how many? Any of you taking my personal finance class next 8 weeks? You got it. You had it. Yeah, you had it already. All right. So personal finance, great class. You should take it. I'm going to teach you how to become a millionaire. It's so easy. It's freaking easy. Super easy. I'm going to show you how to do it. Take my personal finance class. But when you retire, you won't be working maybe, and so a lot of people might drop down to, you know, 30,000. Maybe they're working at Walmart or something, or doing some part-time job or something else. So there's the trajectory over time. As part of what that video was showing is that you move through the quintiles too, right? So there's definitely movement for you guys over time where you might have had relatively poor times in your life and higher income times in your life. And so everybody kind of follows that. Now, what do you think Jordan was that talked to us, my economics major? He was a double, by the way, accounting and economics. He graduated in 2019. He's kind of a new grad. What did you pick up from his presentation that he's making, roughly? Do you think he's in six figures?
Easily.
Yeah, he was in six figures. I don't know what his income was, but we had 130. It wouldn't surprise me if he was making 130. He's in the top 20%. He skyrocketed from college to the top 20. Boom, right? That could be you too. It could be you. It may not, it will likely not be you, by the way. I don't want to put false hopes into you, but it could be. So that's the whole point, is that everybody's different, and that's part of what makes up these statistics that the national media will try to scare you with, that income inequality is the worst crisis of our time, and I think that's dumb. I don't think that's true. All right, so let's see. Let's talk a little bit to wrap things up here, getting close to wrapping up. Poverty. So, how do you measure the poverty level? So first of all, this is a government-determined level of income. So when we say people are in poverty, it's kind of more of a formal level that they've agreed to on how they measure this stuff. So that level, for example, in let's see, I had it here, it was 2020, family of four with income of $26,200. If you are a family making $26,200, you are in poverty. And so what the government does is, if you're in poverty, that can qualify you for some assistance, food stamps, welfare, some sort of level thing. So government help, I'm going to put that in quotes because sometimes they hurt more than they help, as part of what we'll look at. Government help uses means-tested income transfers. This is one of the definitions from your book. So means-tested income transfers. So if you're below the line, you qualify.